guys, so recently I was working on a wig commission and it's really obvious that my client had no idea what they were doing when they bought the wig. That made me realize something. In a previous video I talked about where to buy wigs, but I realized that a lot of beginning cosplayers don't know the first thing about wigs and may end up buying a wig that really isn't suited for their cosplay. Case in point, when I first started cosplaying, I purchased a wig from Amazon. The wig would have worked fine if the character had had her hair down, but I needed it for a cosplay where she was wearing her hair up. But of course, since I didn't know anything about wigs, I didn't realize that you need a special kind of wig to pull a ponytail off. Also, as I mentioned in my other video, I never buy wigs from Amazon these days. That being said, here are some helpful tips to help you find the right wig for your next cosplay. So let's start with length. Obviously, you're going to want to choose a wig that has a similar length to your character's hair. If you can't find an exact match, I recommend buying a wig that is a little bit longer than you need rather than shorter, because it's easier to cut some of it off than it is to add wefts or make an extension for it. The one exception to this is characters with extremely long hair. Generally speaking, if a character's hair is really long, you're going to want a wig that is actually shorter than their hair is. The reason is that long wigs tangle really easily and they can be really uncomfortable to wear for long periods of time. So unless you want to have a really bad headache all day and spend the entire convention trying to comb out your wig, I would recommend not going any longer than hip length, even if your character's hair is longer than that. But if you really want to do a photo shoot where you have the right hair length, then I would recommend watching the Art of Wigs tutorial on using wig clips to learn how to make extensions that you can just clip into the wig and then take out when you're done. All that being said, wigs and obviously color are not the only things that you need to worry about when buying a wig for cosplay. In fact, one of the most important things to consider when wig shopping is whether or not the wig you're looking at is heat resistant. Wigs used for cosplay are pretty much always made of plastic, and if they're not heat resistant, then they will actually melt if you try to use a hair dryer or a straightening iron or a curling iron on them, and that can ruin both the wig and injure you. But you don't have to buy a heat resistant wig. If the wig you're thinking of buying doesn't need a lot of heavy styling, or at least won't need any heat styling, then it's okay if it's not heat resistant. And in case you're wondering, there are high quality wigs out there that are not heat resistant. I know Arta has a line of wigs called Arta Silky that are not heat resistant but are less prone to tangling. While we're on the subject of quality, I will point out that you should never buy a wig from a party store or a Halloween store, because they are pretty much always low quality, rarely heat resistant, and extremely prone to tangling. So the next thing you'll want to consider is the texture of your character's hair. Is it thin? Is it thick? Is it wispy? Is it just kind of normal? Those are all things that you need to consider. You'll also want to consider whether or not your character has a spiky hairdo that you'll have to try to recreate. Spiky hairstyles require wigs that have crimped roots, because the crimped roots prevent the wig lace from being seen when you've got a spike that goes straight up in the air. The Arta Inigo that I used for my Amy Rose wig has crimped roots, and I didn't think much of that at the time, but it turned out to be a really good thing because I wanted to make the bangs defy gravity. Speaking of bangs, take whether or not your character has bangs into consideration. If your character doesn't have bangs, then you're going to want to buy a lace front wig. Lace front wigs are designed to naturally look like they don't have bangs. If you just take a wig with bangs and cut them all off, it's neither going to look good nor natural. However, wearing lace fronts is a little different from wearing regular wigs, so you might want to look up a tutorial on how to put one on. And the last thing you need to consider is whether or not you need a specialty wig. Specialty wigs are wigs that are designed to be worn in ponytails, pigtails, updos, things that you can't really do with a normal wig. You can pull a regular wig into a low ponytail or low pigtails, but you really can't go any higher than the nape of the neck. The reason is that A, the wig lace will show, and B, wig fibers are not like human hair, so they won't actually stay up if you try to do that. There is a way to modify a normal wig so that you can pull it up into an updo, but it's kind of complicated and really not suited for beginners. That being said, every wig vendor does their specialty wigs differently, but you basically have two kinds. You have wigs that are specifically designed to be pulled back, or you have a base wig with accessories that you can clip on to create the hairstyle you want. On Arda, you can buy wigs like the Genie or Chibi, and those are pre-arranged into things like ponytails and pigtails, or you can buy any wig you want as a base and attach any of their accessories to it. With the 5 widths, you're generally going to buy a set of base wig and accessories that were meant for a specific character. Speaking of character-specific wigs, with the exception of the 5 widths, I really don't recommend buying wigs that are advertised as being for a specific character. The problem with a lot of these wigs is that they come from China, and there are 3 main problems I've encountered with them. Number 1, wigs from Chinese companies tend to be too small for the average American. The wigs are made to fit Asian people, and the average Asian has a smaller head than the average American. Number 2, while the quality of the fibers of Chinese wigs that I've worked with are usually pretty good, they tend to be pretty thin. For a character like Honoka from Love Live, that's fine because her hair isn't particularly thick. But if your character has thick or spiky hair, it's not really a good thing. Especially with spiky wigs, because thin wigs are really hard to spike properly. And number 3, a lot of the time, character-specific wigs from China don't actually look like the character's hairstyle. In the case of my Honoka wig, that wasn't really a big deal because all I had to fix was the bangs, which hadn't really been cut or styled at all. But in the case of the client that I mentioned earlier, the wig they brought me was designed for the character they're cosplaying and looks absolutely nothing like the character's hair. I'm pretty much having to revamp a wig to make it look like the hair of a character that it was supposedly made for. That said, it is much easier to style a generic wig from Arda properly than it is a character-specific one from China. As a final note, if you cannot find what you need in the right color, you can always buy a white or really light colored wig and dye it. That's kind of a complicated process, and I'm not really going to go into it because there are tons of tutorials available on wig dyeing and wig styling, and I don't really feel a need to add to the pot. However, I do highly recommend the Arda wig tutorials because they are extremely helpful. If you want to get good at wig styling, those tutorials are going to be your best friend. Well, I hope this was helpful and that now you'll have a much easier time finding the right wig for your cosplay. Sayonara!